Michael Majors playing Blue-White Red Delver up a game against James Miller playing Goblins.
I just want to say, do you see what I mean when I say Michael Majors has insane hair? I mean, come on.
It is nice.
Look at that mop. Not quite Kibler-esque, but it's as close as you're going to get on the Star City circuit.
He doesn't have the really charming Kibler streak of silver running through it.
Sure.
Maybe in a couple of years.
Yeah, well, Kibler also has not had that silver streak running through it all that long. Seems like a more recent addition to the hair upgrades, so, or downgrades. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Upgrades for sure.
Okay.
James Miller with a Taiga and a Goblin War Chief. Cat Souls, I'm willing to assume, is on Goblins here.
I would, if I were a betting man,
yeah,
I'd put my money on Goblin. So Michael Majors here up a game. James Miller resolving a War Chief with the Cavern of Souls. Not a whole lot Majors can do about it other than spot removal, which it seems like he doesn't have in his hand, or else he probably would have just snapped it off on that Goblin War Chief. So
does look like Majors does have Lightning Bolt in his hand here as it resolves Brainstorm.
I feel like he would have had to crack his, Scalding Tarn and not get as much value out of his Brainstorm. Also leaving himself a little bit open to Wasteland should James Miller, peel that and kill his only red source. So maybe being a little overprotective of a potential red source, taking 2 damage that could end up mattering later in the game, but definitely important to get that shuffle effect for Brainstorm to make sure that your next couple draws are much better and fresh.
So Michael deciding how he's going to set this Brainstorm. Very complicated interactions for these decks.
Yeah. Another really funny interaction is Goblin War Chief with Tin Tree Hooligan. And it's actually counterintuitive because the Tin Tree Hooligan only costing 1 mana means that you can't possibly pay the green mana because there are no lands that make both green/red mana simultaneously to cast it. So
Tin Tree Hooligan says if you paid green.
Correct.
And having a War Chief probably prevents you from playing green because you can only pay the 1 red in the casting cost.
Yeah. Kind of similar to the interaction we had earlier between Thorn of Amethyst and Injure Explosives, but in complete reverse.
Yes. Magic is a game with a lot of the parts of the rules that are under the hood are a little messy at times.
Yeah. So Major's deciding to shuffle here before paying 2 life for a Gitaxian Probe, getting a fresh card off the top, and getting more information about James's hand before deciding whether or not he wants to start doing things like Lightning Bolt. Or maybe even just deploying his Grim Lavamancer from hand. Though it's very possible the next turn James just uses Vial, puts in Matron, goes and gets Jib Palm Incinerator to cycle and kill the Grim Lavamancer.
So Insectile Aberration comes across after Michael gets a look at James's hand. Michael's hand flushed with a lot of cheap removal, which is critical against Goblins.
Yeah, a couple bolts. Looks like an Umezawa's Jite, maybe a Sword to Plowshares in there, and a Grim Lavamancer. Or perhaps it's just 1 bolt, 1 Lavamancer. It's hard to tell.
Lightning Bolt takes care of the War Chief. And Michael is going to use a Misty Rainforest to go get a Volcanic Island and add Grim Lavamancer to the table.
So it looks like he's bolting here just to make sure that James has to pay the full amount of mana for all of his guys. Doesn't give them all haste. There is a potential with War Chief to just go like Matron into Matron into Matron into Pile Driver and to kill you. But with so much removal on backup from Major's deck and currently in his hand, it's going to be really hard to do anything crazy like that. So James is going to have to go for the long game with things like Goblin Ringleader and Goblin Matron.
The grindier Goblins game.
Correct. All right, so we're untapping here for James, taking that Vial up to 3. Probably gonna put in the Matron here, maybe even just like hardcast Ringleader before deciding to do that.
So James activates Aether Vial here, goes and puts the Goblin Matron into play, triggers Goblin Matron, finds the Gem Palm Incinerator that you alluded to, and we'll see if he decides to take care of the Grim Lavamancer or the Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, I assume he's just gonna cycle it now and kill the Grim Lavamancer, because if that guy is online for more than a turn, it's really, really bad for the Goblin deck.
So cycle Gem Palm Incinerator, that takes care of the Lavamancer. Another 10th Street Hooligan, the draw for James.
Yeah, casting that here would, I mean, I think actually it's fine. You actually could give Majors the illusion that his Umazajite is safe to cast next turn since he drew the backup Tin Street. Just make sure you announce Cavern of Souls on not green mana and don't kill your own Ether Vial, because that is not a May ability. I learned that the hard way like 10 years ago.
So James does decide to add to his board and deploys the Tin Street Hooligan. Michael takes his opportunity to equip Umezawa's Jitte on the Insectile Aberration, comes across for 3 points of damage, adds 2 counters to the Jitte, takes down the Tin Street Hooligan, and appears to be contemplating taking down the Goblin Matron as well.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be a bad play to just go ahead and take out the Matron. You want to keep as many Goblins off the board as possible to make sure that Gem Palm Incinerator can't actually kill the Delver of Secrets. With James already at a low 10 life, Majors could just aggro him out here with the Delver of Secrets since James doesn't have too many answers to it, and if you're able to keep the creatures off the board, then that turns off, almost all the ways, maybe besides the 2 Tar Fires, to actually kill Delver. So.
And Michael goes ahead and takes care of James's last Goblin. Vial takes up to 4.
Ooh, well, a top-decked Incinerator, along with this Violed-in Ringleader, could spell disaster.
All right, Ringleader reveals Kozan Grip. Mountain Tarfire, Gem Palm Incinerator. Boy. James starting to get a little momentum here.
Man, I just want him to...
Tin Street Hooligan through the Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, this is the maximum, the most blowouts possible. All the 2-for-1s imaginable.
Now Gem Palm Incinerator for the Delver. And James starting to cook with some gas.
I think it's propane. Hank Hill would definitely approve.
Gataxian probe the draw. Source of Plowshares and Batter Skull left over for Michael. James reveals a hand. Another Tin Street Hooligan. Gem Palm Incinerator and Tarfire. An excellent hand here.
Is that number 3?
I believe that is number 3.
Jeez. Well, no reason to cast Batter Skull here as it would just get immediately blown up, but there's a nice one off the top.
True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, I assume that will name James Miller as the player of choice, considering he, doesn't have any Pyroclasms in his deck, so there's no reason to give yourself or your True Name Nemesis protection from yourself so you can cast Pyroclasm.
Expert analysis.
Yes.
True Name Nemesis enters the battlefield, names James, and now we'll see if this tribal deck is able to slog through the scourge of creature decks everywhere in Legacy.
Yeah, so James's hand is just stock full of creatures. He has another Gem Palm Incinerator to take care of any threat that's not True Name Nemesis. He also could just deploy it and try to put more pressure on the board and sandbag the last Tin Street Hooligan for a potential Batter Skull. He does have the Tar Fire to deal a few more points of damage, so he could very easily just flood the board here with creatures and just start attacking into True Name Nemesis. But if he ends up casting the Tin Street Hooligan, he could very easily just lose to Batter Skull. So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays this next these next couple of turns.
All right, Cavern of Souls plays Goblin Lackey, and James just sends the turn back.
Yeah, and now both players content to say draw go. James with arguably a much stronger hand at the moment with Tin Street Hooligan, Tarfire, and a Gem Palm Incinerator. And I think a fresh Wasteland off the top, which not incredibly relevant, could potentially keep Majors off of a Batter Skull and allow him to actually cast the Tin Street Hooligan to start getting a little more aggressive. But this True Name Nemesis definitely holding the fort right now.
So you see Wasteland here. Go after one of James' land. I'm assuming a Volcanic here. Volcanic goes to the graveyard. And turn passes back to Michael, who draws Daze.
Yeah, a card that is... I won't say it's embarrassing in this matchup, but it's not very good.
Rashad Import the draw for James, and now James can start going to work on Michael's red mana, locking him out of it on the main phase. So you see Import Michael's last Volcanic Island during Michael's upkeep.
Yeah, no longer can you float a red mana to your draw step, draw a bolt, and kill a creature. That has long since passed, and something I am quite frustrated about because I hate Rich Import as a card. I just hate the way it's designed. I hate the way it prevents interaction, but it's obviously a very powerful tool for these tribal-based decks with Ether Vial because it allows you to disrupt your opponent while being able to, deploy threats.
So a big draw here for James here. He finds Goblin Matron. Goblin is thumbing back between Goblin Ringleader and Siege Gang Commander. So a lot of power this opens up. He has a Vial set on 4 here, so he can get Ringleader and deploy it this turn, or go get Siege Gang Commander and try to set it up for next turn.
Yeah, I would be quite happy on James's side with either of these decisions. Although the ringleader allows for more pressure right now. If you tick up the vial to 5 for next turn and you deploy the siege gang immediately, you do have the potential to peel land and just throw 6 damage at Michael's dome. Yeah, he's gonna take the safer route just to make sure nothing bad can really happen when you draw 4 more cards. So.
All right, so he goes and gets the ringleader, Aether
Plus,
Vial.
It could be anything.
Could be anything.
It could even be a
Thalia, Aether Vial, Goblin Lackey, and a Taiga.
It could even be a siege gang commander.
Yeah, you could get it all. So James finds Goblin Lackey. And now we'll see if he decides to get ambitious here and start sending in the troops.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's content waiting. Majors could have a double removal spell here and make this attack really bad and give him a chance to get back in the game, whereas if he just waits 2 more turns, he has inevitability. Michael isn't going to be able to kill him very easily from 10 with just True Name Nemesis. If that were the case, he would have been attacking multiple turns in a row before this and using his removal spells more defensively. But
all right, James is going to get in here. 10th Street Hooligan, Goblin Lackey, and 2 Goblin Ringleaders.
Shockingly, I stand corrected.
So we'll see the extent to which Michael has removal in his hand. The more removal here, the better, of course.
Yeah, I think all he has is Swords of Plowshares and a bunch of counter spells in the Batter Skulls, so he's probably going to plow one of the ringleaders at 10th Street, block another 2-power guy, take 3 damage, but that will allow the Goblin Lackey to trigger. So it's possible he wants to get rid of that instead of one of the 2-power guys, though he is at a precariously low life total.
So True Name Nemesis appears to be going in front of one of the Goblin Ringleaders. Source of Plowshare taking out the other one.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable play. James has access to a ton of mana right now, so the Lackey trigger is not actually that detrimental. You know, you get to play 1 free guy, but what's 1 free guy when, you know, the 1 point of damage when you're going down to, 7 versus 6 life against a deck full of creatures and a handful of creatures.
So James deciding what he wants to put into play. He decides on Gem Palm Incinerator entering the battlefield.
Yeah, again, playing it safe with that 10th Street Hooligan, making sure that a resolved Batterskull doesn't just punish him or potentially, you know, a resolved Sword of Fire and Ice or something. I mean, Michaels doesn't have that, I don't think, but, you know, just playing it safe with the 10th Street Hooligan, making sure he's not going to lose to any sort of Batterskull shenanigans.
Misty Rainforest, the draw of Michael, no help here. Doesn't allow him to cast Batterskull. The rest of his hand, Force of Will and Daze, offering no real help against Cavern of Souls and Aether Vial.
Yeah. So we have a Goblin Lackey in hand, as well as the 10th Street Hooligan, freshly drawn Thalia, but no access to white mana, and a Tarfire. So if we send everyone here and Michael does not have a removal spell, we get to deal 4 points of damage, putting him to 3, and Tarfire only sends him to 1. So we're not going to kill him this turn, but putting him in a position where he's very likely dead next turn.
So here comes all of James's anemic troops. 10th Street Hooligans swallowed up by True Name Nemesis. Goblin Lackey triggers.
Ow. Ow, ow, ow.
And brings in another Goblin Lackey. Gem Palm Incinerator and Goblin Matron also connects for James, knocking Michael down to 3.
Don't cast it. Don't do it. Don't do it. He's going to cast it. Now Batterskull off the top.
Well, between Port and the fact that he has Tarfire in hand, he's actually protected right now.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Because
well,
if Michael has to use the fetch land here, then that knocks him to 2. Tarfire finishes the job.
Except that he has Force of Will, and he could force the Tarfire and go to 1, but I don't know. The a heads-up play actually would have been kind of cool is, next turn attacking with everybody, whatever the Batterskull blocks, Tarfire the creature that the Batterskull blocks so that the lifelink doesn't come into the equation. But, I think it would have been very, very difficult for James Miller to lose that game.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of risk incurred there by James, but he takes the second game to tie up the match. Going to the sideboard here, we see Michael Majors. Sideboard, 1 Sword of Feast and Famine, 2 Grim Lavamancer, 4 Meddling Mage, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Elemental Blast, a Swords of Plowshare, and a Wear and Tear. Not really offering up a ton here. The 2 Grim Lavamancers seem very good. The additional Swords of Plowshares also seems good.
Yeah, from James Miller's side, we saw this earlier where he had some sideboard cards that were pretty good against most Delver decks because of Tarmogoyf, Nimble Mongoose, and sometimes even Deathray Shaman. But now we're playing against red, white, blue, and I mean, maybe you have Corrosion Grip and maybe Thalia, but this blue-eye-red version of Delver is a little more mana-intensive because you do have Stoneforge Mystic in your deck along with True Name Nemesis. So they're running 20 lands instead of 18, so the Thalias are a lot less detrimental. So, I mean, I saw him draw one last game, so it looks like he probably just boarded in the 2 Corrosion Grips and the 4 Thalias. Possibly not all 4 Thalias, or possibly even just like 1 Corrosion Grip. So
Yeah, we did see Corrosion Grip revealed to a Ringleader trigger, and we also saw Thalia drawn that game, so we know at least those cards have come in. This Goblin's build is, it's interesting to me to see a deck that most creature decks that you look at, they have some sort of backdoor ways they're trying to handle True Name Nemesis. The bug decks are flush with answers, Liliana and Golgari Charm. You see, Red Elemental Blast in Michael Major's sideboard, definitely dedicated to fighting, among other things, True Name Nemesis. Goblins in James Miller's list, the answer seems to be, I'm just going to try to work around it. I'm going to try to flood the board with more stuff and win the game that way.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be working reasonably well. He has the 3 Tentry Hooligans main deck to take care of the equipment, and the equipment are actually the more detrimental aspect of the combo of True Name Nemesis and, out of the Blue-Eye-Red Delver decks or just the Stoneforge Mystic True Name decks in general. If he is able to shut down the equipment, then the True Name Nemesis just a 3/1, which blocks a guy, but you have, a million of those with Ringleader and Matron and stuff. So it's pretty easy to grind through True Name Nemesis when there's no Umezawa Shite or Batterskull attached.
Yeah, Goblins is very well adept at overpowering a single blocker if it's given time.
Right.
Tarmogoyf sometimes is hard to beat because Tarmogoyf doesn't give you very much time. True Name Nemesis is much slower. It's additional mana. It's not hitting you for 4 or 5 points of damage. But like you said, the equipment is what really makes that combination unbeatable.
Yeah, I would expect James here to be boarding out Goblin Sharpshooter, which he has a singleton copy of. Potentially Skirk Prospector, since it doesn't have a whole lot of value. It's not really all that threatening, so there's no reason for your opponent to actually kill it. And you don't really need to ramp in this matchup. You just need to outlast your opponent, basically. And Skirk Prospector is much better against combo decks. It's a great combination with Goblin Sharpshooter. So usually when you board out one, you want to board out the other.
Yeah, Goblin Sharpshooter are much more about matchups like Elves, for example, other small tribal decks.
Yeah, and since you have the Goblin Matrons in your deck, it's okay to play these one-of bullets that are very powerful in specific matchups, such as Goblin Sharpshooter, and, feel free to take them out when they're not so great.
Again, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to the entire broadcast, Cedric Phillips had to receive some medical attention. He's back in the hotel recovering, and today is also his birthday, and what better birthday present to give Cedric Phillips than Goblins?
A day off.
A day off. And Goblins in the elimination rounds of a Legacy event for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah, Max Teets would beg to disagree, but, I mean, actually, no, he's been playing Blue-Eye-Red Delver lately, so I can't even say that, so maybe you're just right. We did see a lot of Goblins on camera today, though, so maybe it's just Atlanta is flush with Goblins.
Yep. They're
both in Magic and on the city streets, but...
Michael Major's about to kick off the 3rd game.
All right, let's go to the match here and take a look at these hands and see how this game is going to play out. It looks like James does have an Aether Vial in his opening hand, but a Goblin Matron to go along with it. Not a whole lot else. Some lands, a Vial, and a Matron.
Yeah, 4 lands, one of which is Rashad and Port, 2 Aether Vials, and a Goblin Matron.
I mean, it's not exciting, but the Vial is very important in the matchup. So, if Majors, he's probing here, so if he sees that there's 2 Vials, so now he's not going to burn a Force of Will or anything like that on an Aether Vial early on, because he'd have to take care of both of them, and that just does not seem feasible.
So Michael taking some notes down here. James, it's nice to know when the hand you keep when you contemplate mulliganing is actually non-embarrassing when you are hit with a Gitaxian Probe.
That's actually my my line or my bar for keeping in mulligan. It's like, would I be embarrassed if my opponent Gitaxian Probed me? And if the answer is yes, I mulligan. And in this matchup, that's close with this hand. It's not embarrassing. Aether Vial is that important. Matron can get Ringleader. Things can very easily get out of control. Yeah. So I am not disappointed that James kept this hand. I think it's a smart keep, though it could potentially backfire if he does not draw spells.
Yeah, so you see James here use the Scalding Tarn to go get a mountain and deploy the Aether Vial.
Yeah, and he also has the option over the next few turns, if Majors doesn't really present any more threats other than Delver, He could just use Rishon Import to keep the lands down on Major's side, make sure there's no True Name Nemesis action while he's able to build up the Vial, eventually get Matron into play, go get some baby goblins to take care of, and hopefully take the game.
So Michael Majors fails to reveal for his Delver of Secrets, drawing a Wasteland.
A third Wasteland, I might add.
Text James 4-1 with Delver of Secrets, plays Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, here comes either Jitte or Batterskull, both of which are pretty amazing, especially when your opponent does not have a whole lot of action. The Batterskull here going to be gaining Michael a ton of life against James, and he does have the Taiga, so he could potentially kill it maybe if Majors taps out one turn with a Tintry Hooligan that he can tutor for with Goblin Matron, but I don't know. It's going to be a long grind.
So James trying to cut Michael off of white mana, uses Wasteland, targets Michael's Tundra, and adds a second Aether Vial to the board.
You know, I don't honestly think Michael has another white source in his hand. I think he just has 2 Wastelands and a bunch of spells, but luckily peels a Misty Rainforest to be able to activate the Stoneforge Mystic.
Fails to reveal again for Delver. But as you said, critically drew a Misty Rainforest, which enables Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah,
We'll see here if Michael's willing to attack into this Vial on 1. How important is this? How important does he believe this Delver Secrets to be?
well, there's only one draw step from James that he doesn't know, and that is a Wasteland was the other one. So he's playing it safe in case there's a Goblin Lackey. Feels like trading the Delver for a Goblin Lackey is very bad in this situation, as Delver could easily be his only route to victory if James is able to build the board up enough with a bunch of chump blockers for the Batterskull and eventually find a way out.
So James draws for his turn. Hand's pretty flush with goblins now, and those vials are starting to tick up.
Yeah, it looks like we have Ringleader, Matron, and War Chief, if I'm not mistaken, along with the Tundra, the Taiga, and the Rishon Port, which we just played.
So James simply plays Rishon Port and passes.
Yeah, Major's hand looks like a Batterskull, a True Name Nemesis, a couple Wastelands. Maybe he does have another color source, and I was mistaken. He is flipping his hand quite fast. Both these gentlemen not giving us much room to breathe.
So we'll see if Michael's willing to deploy this Batterskull. He knows about the Matron in hand, so if he's concerned about Goblin Matron finding Tin Street Hooligan, if he can't fight over that, perhaps he considers actually waiting to deploy this Batterskull.
Well, he has enough mana to potentially bounce the Batterskull if things could go awry. But Major's here just tanking on whether or not he wants to ultimately leave his only source of white mana being tapped down by the Rishon Port. If he's able to draw another fetch land or a blue source, he can actually just cast True Name Nemesis. Major's also contemplating potentially just killing the Rishon Port, so.
Yeah. Michael does not deploy the Batterskull, simply goes to his turn, reveals Force of Will to Delver of Secrets.
Yeah, and if I were Majors, I would actually probably fetch here because the Force of Will is mostly a dead card, but I think he's just trying to protect his color sources from both Wasteland and Rishon Port.
Yeah. If he were to sack his Misty Rainforest now, James would have an opportunity to port it, and then he's exposed to Wasteland, and Michael has demonstrated he's not willing to make that sacrifice quite yet.
Yeah, I believe that James could make a reasonable play at the end of turn here by just porting the fetch land, and that'll force Majors to go ahead and fetch so that it will open it up to a potential Wasteland, but Majors will be able to deploy the Batterskull in response.
So Insectile Aberration across for 3 points of damage. Michael. On the other side of the bracket, our 1 seed, Stephen Mann, defeats Justin Parenti 2-0, and Stephen Mann will be advancing to the semifinals.
All right, well, it looks like I was 0 for 1 on that. 0 for 2, basically, if I said that BBD was going to win, so.
Pen, please. So Michael really debating over this land drop here.
Yeah, I mean, he has 2 more Wastelands in his hand. I don't think it'd be a terrible play to just Wasteland Rishon Port here. But in response, the Misty Rainforest is going to be targeted. So we're going to fetch, likely go get Tundra, and play the Wasteland past turn, and threaten Batterskull next turn.
So some operations here, both players getting their land situated.
So many shuffles. I could totally do some LMFAO right now, but I'm not gonna because I have too much class.
I do not know the reference.
Every day I'm shuffling. No?
You've lost me. James
No, really?
takes file up to 3 and up to 2.
There was a whole commercial with like guinea pigs in a car or something, and
I do not know what to tell you.
okay. I don't know, man. I think literally everyone watching knows exactly what I'm talking about, so I don't feel that bad.
James here deciding how he wants to proceed. Again, he has to be concerned about Batterskull getting deployed here. There's also the threat of Umezawa's Jitte. He can't be 100% sure that it's not hanging out in Michael's hand here, so that contorts his play as well.
Yeah, Majors is going to be able to deploy the Batterskull and play his third land next turn to protect it from 10th Street Hooligan. So I think Majors probably sequenced this game a little more strongly than I would have, and I would have been a little more aggressive with the Batterskull, trying to flip the Delver, battle in for 8 points of damage. But then I would have probably gotten my Batterskull killed. So Michael is definitely showing how strong of a player he can be in tight situations like this, playing around as much as possible since his opponent's not really threatening him too much right now.
Yep. Been very disciplined thus far. And James, too, very cautious about his land. Remember, he's facing down these wastelands, so all of his land drops are, the importance of them are also magnified because he only gets one shot with these plateaus or taigas, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, if he draws a Thalia, he can leave his Vial on 2 to put it into play. But unlike Thalia, 10th Street Hooligan absolutely needs the green colored source upon casting as opposed to vialing it in.
So Michaels makes his move now, end of turn, uses Stoneforge Mystic to put Batterskull into play. We'll see if James wants to do anything with his vials here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any potential, matron into Gem Palm Incinerator shenanigans. He would need one more Goblin in play to be able to take care of the Delver. But Majors here coming in with a lot of power. James could potentially flash in War Chief at end of turn, but or maybe even during combat to block the Stoneforge Mystic. But Majors solidly in the driver's seat at the moment. We'll see how this game goes.
Declares combat. Majors coming across for 7 points of damage with his Batterskull and his Insectile Aberration. James contemplating whether or not he wants to, again, use his vials to potentially block.
Yeah, I think blocking here would be a little loose since he's not able to actually kill either of the creatures. And chump blocking with Matron is fine, but you need to build up your Goblin base so that your Gem Palm Incinerators actually have a chance of digging you out of this. So, I mean, right now, James has put himself in a corner just because of how fast Major's draw was. Didn't really draw like a Cavern of Souls or something to make sure that his Goblins would resolve if cast, so he's having to rely entirely on the Ether Vials to play most of his spells.
James also has the option again of using his Aether Vial, putting Goblin Matron into play and going in game Tarfire, potentially fighting over Insectile Aberration, but not a long-term solution to the Batterskull, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably the strongest play is to get the Tarfire and kill the Delver now, just to preserve your life total for one thing, but for another, just making sure that there's no flyer in play, since there are very few ways for your deck to actually deal with the flyers other than the 2 Tarfires and the Gem Palm Incinerators.
So you see Tarfire here on the stack, targeting Insectile Aberration. We'll see. Michael does have Force of Will in hand, so he can fight over this if he chooses to.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to use that Force of Will for all that much in this matchup, so if I were Majors, I probably would have just Snap Force that, pitching any random blue spell in my hand, simply because that 3 damage a turn is not going to be able to get chump blocked, whereas the Batterskull can literally be blocked till the end of time thanks to all these card advantage spells from James. But I think Majors did draw the fetch line here, so he's going to be able to deploy his True Name Nemesis, though if James is able to peel a 10th Street Hooligan off of the Goblin Ringleader or his draw step, then he's going to be able to crush that Batterskull, assuming Majors does deploy the True Name Nemesis.
And you see it under play, naming James. And you can see the big thing for Goblins here is just the games where it has time to get set up and can make a really commanding board, but it's a little hard for it to fend off these durable or very efficient beaters.
So I think now the game plan for Majors is just to attack 4 times with the True Name Nemesis, and hopefully not die in the meanwhile. And this is
Whoa.
a very good ringleader.
A loaded ringleader off the David Vile shows Skirk Prospector, Tin Street Hooligan, and another Goblin ringleader.
Yeah, I'm just waiting so hard for James to violin War Chief and then cast Tin Street Hooligan. I just want it to happen.
So Michael taking notes here.
He seems like a pretty heads-up Goblin player, though, so I give him credit enough to 10 Street before War Chiefing, so let's see how this plays out here. Killing Batterskull is incredibly important at the moment for making sure that you actually have a chance to attack past your opponent's creature base over the next few turns, since Major's plan right now is just attack 4 times with True Name Nemesis.
And here's the thing, James has to be really careful because playing this Tin Street Hooligan, if he decides to go down the road, involves committing his Taiga against these wastelands. And so he doesn't necessarily get another shot to Tin Street Hooligan this game, even if he draws one.
Yes, but this also gives Majors the ability to use Force of Will. He still has another land in hand, I believe, so one more land, and he could just suit up Batterskull to True Name Nemesis and end the game very quickly.
So Force of Will on the Tin Street Hooligan. Michael trying to protect his Batterskull. Skirk Prospector acted as James' board. This provides him with a lot of good chump blocking against Batterskull potentially, but again, not a long-term answer to True Name Nemesis.
Yeah. And I actually really like Michael's lines in this game. He's really shown his ability of, foresight into how the game's going to progress, not using the Force of Will on the Tarfire so that he can actually save the Force of Will for the Tin Street Hooligan, which has to be hard cast in order to trigger its ability, which means that in order for it to resolve, James would have had to have a Cavern of Souls, meaning that the Batterskull, the way he played it, is going to stick around for much longer than I anticipated.
So Michael ponders here, looking at a land, a Delver of Secrets, and a Lightning Bolt. Potentially attracted to add another flyer, and the Lightning Bolt could turn off the clock here as well. And just be a flexible removal spell in the event that James starts to cobble together a real board.
Yeah, I actually don't mind just keeping the land on top, drawing Lightning Bolt, playing your land from your hand, using Lightning Bolt defensively to stifle damage next turn, and then playing your 5th land next turn, suiting up the True Name Nemesis, and attacking for 7 points of damage, potentially using the Lightning Bolt to finish off the game with an end-of-turn bolt to the dome.
So a lot of paths here for Michael. I would be surprised to see him shuffle this Ponder, as it gives him a lot of tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be able to find the line. Just keep Bolt, attack for 3, Bolt, end step, untap, equip, kill you. So I feel like that has to be the play he's thinking about, and he's just trying to figure out what cards could disrupt that. Specifically, Risha Port, Wasteland, any sort of mana denial, and I think that's basically it. Maybe another Tin Street Hooligan on the Batterskull.
So Michael plays a Wasteland before combat, attacks with True Name Nemesis and Batterskull. James throws his Goblin Mission in front before damage, sacrifices it to Skirk Prospector to prevent the lifelink ability. And we'll see here, does Michael want to use the Wasteland to cut off Tin Street Hooligan, or does he want to save it to equip?
I think he's just going to go for the dome because he's going to go for the kill because the longer he waits, the less likely it is that he, can actually, or the more likely it is that James can crawl back into the game. This ringleader here could draw into a lot of really good cards, potentially killing off most of the things that Majors could play other than the True Name Nemesis. So it looks like Michael is relatively safe here to just play the land next turn, equip Batterskull, and swing for the win, alongside the Lightning Bolt in his hand to do the extra 3 points of damage.
So Ringleader reveals a Gem Palm Incinerator and a Siege Gang Commander for James.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of potential for damage here. If James decides to violin the War Chief, play a land, cast Siege Gang Commander, attack with everybody except Siege Gang Commander, Batterskull blocks one of them, you sack it to Skirk Prospector, deal some combat damage, sack a bunch of guys, dome your opponent for some more. This is old school combo kill goblins right here, except it's not quite enough.
Yeah, Michael's at still a fairly healthy 18 life.
We do have a couple of Gem Palm Incinerators in hand, which can take care of the Germ as well as the Stoneforged Mystic, but they cannot take care of the True Name Nemesis, and you're seeing just how powerful a card it is in this particular matchup.
Yeah, most honest creature decks really struggle with this card.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, some bug decks play Marsh Casualties. It's not a real Magic card. It's an imaginary card they decided to put in a weird set, and it just so happened to be a 3-mana Progenitus.
So James trying to figure out how we can either fend off lethal next turn or apply lethal this turn.
Yeah, he's actually tapping his Taiga here, and that seems pretty loose considering that I think 10th Street Hooligan is one of his major outs. However, I think he does have a Cavernous Souls in hand, but I could be mistaken. I think that's just a Plateau.
So adds Relic. Michael's graveyard, not really a resource, so this has to be about cycling.
Yeah, I mean, from looking at Michael's deck list, he actually has very few cards that interact with the graveyard. I don't think this is a great sideboard option for James. It's kind of a brick. He gets to cycle it. He gets to potentially turn off something like Grim Lavamancer, but there are no Tarmogoyfs, no Nimble Mongoose, nothing of that sort to really punish Michael with the Relic of Progenitus.
So James just passes the turn back, and we'll see if Michael goes for it here.
Yeah, I mean, he has to see it. With the Ponder plan, he's just going to bolt, plays the land, equips, and attacks for the win next turn.
So Michael untaps, draws. As you mentioned, deploys the 5th land, moves the Batterskull onto the True Name Nemesis, and there's a lethal attack. Michael Majors 2-1 over James Miller playing Goblins.
Very well played.
Michael moves on to the semifinals where Tom Ross and his Infect deck await.
Now, Majors does have a lot of cheap spot removal in that matchup, so it's going to be interesting to watch.